All right, we've playing this one for a long time, and when I saw what was coming out next week, given the fact of what it is, I thought this would be a really good versus to tie in. So that's what we're going to do this week.
We do a romantic one for that week, and that's why the one related to Deadpool is happening this week instead of next week.
Right, exactly. And we're going to have an Oscar one too, and I don't know what we're doing on the 21st. You guess we'll have to find out. You'll find out when I do. So, that being said, we're going to find out, finally, what happens when Kick-Ass battles Super. AJ, take it away.
Alright. We're going to start... there's a lot more to say about Kick-Ass, so we're going to start with Kick-Ass. No offense, James Gunn. I apologize. But this was kind of... I feel like we'd had movies like this before. One's not immediately jumping out at me.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the first movie we had after superhero movies started to reign in the movie industry, where we had that movie where we tried to take the superhero genre and add realism to it.
Maybe The Punisher?
That might be it. Well, I mean, like, since like, ever since Iron Man, really.
Yeah.
And then from then on, when superhero movies just really, really took over. Well, I guess technically it started with X-Men.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had Raimi's Spider-Man, and then Raimi's Spider-Man kind of tipped it off, and then Iron Man made it indestructible. And everything that followed, I mean. So we were brought this I'm not sure how old the book is. I was thinking the book was not long before, because I know the sequel book was written like right before the movie came out. The sequel came out. This is all confusing, but
I got this.
Yes,
don't worry.
It was an interesting time to bring out a movie where the first scene of the movie is we're basically. Obviously, our opening scene is the Armenian guy with the wings on the building, and it's made up to be, like, it's going to be this big triumphant superhero moment, and he crashes into a taxicab and dies. And we immediately realize that this is going to be kind of a more... we're approaching the superhero genre in a realistic way, despite the fact that it's still a comic book. It's very... yeah, all that. And to the point to where not only is it kind of going kind of the anti-superhero route, it's also very, very much in the superhero route as well. It's an origin story. It's the dorky kid that can't get the girl and has the dorky friends. There's even a moment in this that is an exact replica of a scene in Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. When Peter sees Mary Jane waving and thinks she's waving at him. That scene's totally in this movie with the "Hey Gorgeous" line. So, I'm assuming they kind of tried to mix both of those in there, because while it's not really an average superhero movie, it also is, eventually. So, we're kind of juggling both of those things, but in a clever way. Like, we have the whole thing where, his whole start at being Kick-Ass, a lot of it is just boredom and walking around alleys looking for crime that's not happening. I like that he eventually sets a time frame for himself where it's like, I only fight crime around 9. It's between 9 and 2 on the weekdays. And it takes it takes many interesting approaches to the material, but one that really stuck out to me was it basically talks about why the very popular thing it was when Batman Begins came out, and that was it was always kind of a thing that people kind of had in there, but when Batman Begins came out, everybody kind of jumped on this thing of, I never really thought about it before, but Bruce Wayne is a psychopath. To kind of bring up the fact that to be a superhero in real life, you would have to be totally insane. And I love Dave's line about, when he's talking about, it's basically time to stop talking about it and actually become a superhero. His comparison is, like every serial killer knows, eventually fantasizing isn't enough. He compares being a superhero to being a serial killer.
Yeah.
And of course we go into that whole thing about naturally, as we bring up, 2 years later when The Dark Knight Rises would come out, they talked about this with John Blake. Sure, and Clark Dude talks about it at the beginning of this movie. What happens the first time Dave goes to fight crime dressed as Kick-Ass? He comes this close to death. He gets stabbed and then hit by a car and taken to the hospital, and most of his body is not really him. It's basically metal. So, and I remember the first time I saw that scene in the theater, when it was so extreme, when he got stabbed after his supposed heroic event, and then he stumbles out into the street and gets hit by a car. I thought when I first saw it that was going to be like a fantasy scene. Like, it was him kind of imagining how this scenario could go. But no, that shit was really happening to him. But at that point is kind of where he somewhat does get a superpower, because his nerve endings are fucked up and his bones are made of metal, so he actually does kind of have a superpower after that. Though it doesn't always work, as we learn. And then we see that it actually has this legitimately gradual thing about it. Like, there's the whole... He kind of stops those guys by accident, and then him fighting them goes viral, and then that's how he gets famous. It's actually kind of... Like, Craig Ferguson's talking about him, and his YouTube views keep going up. It actually feels like if that were to actually happen, that's pretty much exactly how it would go down.
Oh, for sure. And Craig Ferguson would be the one to be talking about it.
Yeah. Well, not anymore.
Back then, it would have been.
Yeah.
2010.
But the very interesting thing here is we really, really play up that realism. But then, and of course, this movie's kind of showing it's only 2010, but of course it's already extremely dated, because Kick-Ass's main way of communication to the outside world is MySpace. This was almost dated already when the movie came out. Like, it was on its last dying phase at that point.
Pretty much.
So the very interesting transition we have here, though, is when we meet Big Daddy and Hit Girl. And the very interesting contrast here is Dave is very much in a movie where he's trying to be a superhero in real life, but real life is being real life on him, and it's not going very successfully. But then when he meets Big Daddy and Hit Girl basically are in a superhero movie. Because they're like the actual real thing. Like, when we see Dave do his thing, he's very much in the real world, and when we see Big Daddy and Hit Girl, we feel like we're actually watching an actual superhero movie. And then these two worlds kind of collide when they meet, and obviously that takes us in some interesting directions. And the great thing about Mindy and Chloe Moretz's performance here is the fact that obviously Hit Girl has been being raised to do this since she was, 5, I think is what they said, when he got out of prison. So this is basically her life. She is a trained killer, but at the same time, she's still very childlike about it. Because there's the whole, when he's, showing her how to take bullets, it's, no whining, like, as she would if she were a child, whining about something normal. And the whole, how excited she gets to be getting a birthday present that's going to be knives, and she does the whole puppy thing first, and then, once she gets the knife, she does the, "Dad, look at me, you're not looking," as if another child would do if they were doing something totally normal. So, she leads a totally normal life, it's just the assassin stuff is in place of normal things. And yes, that brings us into, obviously, Big Daddy, as we were just talking about. And yeah, I love, they very blatantly acknowledge this in the sequel. The sequel covers a lot of things in this territory that that were kind of, people were thinking in this, and I'm glad they covered it in that one, which was, yeah, it's very easy to love Big Daddy as a character, because not only is he so badass, but he's also such a good father to her. He's fatherly to her despite what he's teaching her. There's still very much that connection, and he's a very lovable character. But at the same time, yes, Big Daddy is a psychopathic killer.
Oh, yeah.
Big Daddy is out of his goddamn mind. And do we even need to talk about the perfect casting choice that is Cage? And Cage brought so much to this too that wasn't even on the page. A lot of this is just him. Like he came up with that brilliant idea to where it's the idea of when you see like a superhero in a cowl and you think people might recognize his face just down here. So Damon just has the mustache, but when he's Big Daddy, he adds facial hair to make him less recognizable. That's like brilliant, and apparently that was Cage's idea.
Was the Adam West voice his idea?
Yeah, and he's doing the Adam West voice.
Yes, that was awesome.
Yes, that was totally his idea as well.
Sweet.
And yeah, there's that whole idea where you there's a whole moral thing, where he's kind of. Okay, yeah. One thing that got this movie a lot of attention when it came out was just Hit Girl in general. Not only... How old was Chloe Moretz at the time? Like, 12?
12 or 13. I mean, she's 18 now.
Yeah. But then there was the time when the movie was shot, and then when it came out, so it's kind of hard to tell.
I'd say 12 or 13.
But she's saying every word under the sun. She's saying, okay, you cunts, let's see what you can do. And we have a signal in the sky that's in the shape of a giant cock. Among many other things. And she is murdering people left and right. I've never really, like, counted for sure, but I'm curious of what Hit Girl's body count alone is in this. And the fact that it's disturbing to a lot of people because that's just her life. Because she was raised to see it as like a game, as Damon put it, when he's talking to Marcus. And how he made her backstory into... Like, he actually drew and wrote a comic book of her backstory to make it this big game for her, despite the fact that he's training her to actually murder people in extremely violent and graphic ways. And there's another childlike moment there when she's killing all the guys in Rasul's apartment, and the dude pulls the knife out, and her response is, "Hey, I have one of those." Which, of course, you would say to another child if you saw they had the same toy as you.
Right.
So it's very clear, and the fact, this whole thing also to where. Because he got her into this so young, all of this is just totally normal to her. And there's really, like obviously, there's another thing, the sequel made a whole storyline out of this. That it's just to a point now to where you can't even pull her out of it. This is just her life, and that's pretty much the way she's programmed from now on. So that makes her a very, very interesting character, to say the least. And yeah, as I was saying, at that point, it seems like they're in an actual superhero movie because they have tragic backstories. They have all the weaponry and stuff like that. They have God knows where his money comes from. I assume he steals it. And then there's the whole like Hit Girl can do the whole thing where she jumps from rooftops. They are very much actually in a superhero movie. That Davis just accidentally found his way into. And yeah, obviously another thing is that it kind of took people by surprise was the type of movie that it is, where it's kind of fun and has kind of I mean, it does kind of have a light quality to it. It just also happens to be extremely violent. And like I said, extremely graphic as well. There is mostly involving Frank's guys. Like there is the when they put Dexter Fletcher and Jason Fleming are in this, who are carried over from the Guy Ritchie movies that Matthew Vaughn produced. Where Dexter Fletcher is Cody, and they put him in the compactor in the junkyard. Which of course is followed up by Moretz's wonderful delivery of "What a douche." There's the guy they put in the giant microwave. Like I said, everything that happens to Dave when he first goes out, this movie is fucking brutal as fuck.
It was not what you were expecting if you went into it expecting a regular superhero movie and not knowing anything about the
Well, yeah, that's
story.
The thing also was, Matthew Vaughn had already done Layer Cake.
Right.
But the thing about it was he was a producer on Lock, Stock, and Snatch. So when he did Layer Cake, he was basically making a Guy Ritchie movie again. That's basically what Layer Cake is. But it was when he made this that he kind of found a style. Like now, every time Matthew Vaughn makes a movie, you can tell it's his now. When you watch Kingsman, it's just impossible. When you watch Kingsman, it is absolutely 100% in your brain. This is definitely the guy that did Kick-Ass.
Oh yeah.
X-Men First Class, he kind of went a different direction because, well, there was Marvel and PG-13, and there was already kind of a tone established there. Even though he did do the movie where we have Wolverine saying "Go fuck yourself." But nevertheless, when he did this in Kingsman, he totally adopted a style that you can totally, as soon as you see it, you know that it's him. And that was really great that he found his way kind of out of that Guy Ritchie territory, to where you can tell Layer Cake was basically him kind of transitioning from Guy Ritchie to his own thing. Because it was clearly more of one than the other. But here, he really just kind of, like, it's not that original to do the comic book movie in the style of the comic book, like with its panels and the meanwhile and the, however many months earlier or whatever. But still, this movie definitely has a style that's identifiable just to it. And then we have, and of course, obviously, on top of him being the director, the action scenes are really, really well done. Like, this is one of those movies where it seems like, because it's kind of grounded in realism for a while, like, it would just kind of come off cheap, almost. But this movie is really, really stylized, but in a really good way. Because everything does kind of look fake. Like, all the blood is CGI, and when it's really clearly animated when Rasul gets stabbed through the back. You can tell none of this is real. But then there's some, jarring stuff, like the guy getting his leg cut off in Rasul's apartment. Sometimes they go that extra mile to show you that they use some practical stuff. But regardless of that, there's a lot of stuff. There's the scene with Big Daddy in the warehouse, which kind of, like the church scene in Kingsman, kind of had that same style to it that this scene in the warehouse with Big Daddy does, where they have, it's like it's just a slight variation on the music from 28 Days Later, when he kills everybody in the warehouse and then sets it on fire. Which is a really, really awesome... It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, of a movie that's packed with awesome scenes. And of course, the incredible scene when Hit Girl rescues them from the public execution. The scene where we lose Big Daddy, sadly. Which I really liked that they did that, by the way. I read the book after I saw the movie, actually. And they changed Big Daddy's death in a big way that really, really worked. Not only just as a movie, but for the characters also. Mm-hmm. In the book, they just shoot Big Daddy through the back of the head.
Yeah.
And, like, out his face. And it's fucking disgusting. Like, his eyeballs flying out and everything. And it's just that simple. But the whole thing where he's kind of still teaching her in those last moments as he's burning to death. And she's really kind of taking over for him now that he's about to no longer be here. But not only does it help that his death isn't so abrupt, but the fact that they do get to have that last moment together. The line, it's always, she just kind of puts it in there, but one line I always found kind of sad, actually really sad, was the moment when, as she's talking to him as he's dying, one of the things she says was, because she had just been shot by Chris before they showed up here and left for dead, what she says to him is, I'm trying to remember the exact line, but I can't, I'm going to have to paraphrase. Basically, that getting shot by somebody else hurt more than getting shot by him when they were practicing. And he says it's because he was using low velocity rounds. It's just such a nice but really, really sad moment. And then, of course, they kind of... It almost seems like a callback to not just Big Daddy, but Cage himself. The fact that Cage is one of the most famous Elvis fans in the world. Like, even if you don't know much about celebrities' personal lives, I would think you know that Nicolas Cage is one of the biggest Elvis fans of all time. And who is playing when we see Kick-Ass on the jetpack and all of Frank's guys are getting taken out at once. it's an Elvis song.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like it's like a final ode to Big Daddy in that scene when that happens. And of course I completely glossed over Chris by accident, sorry. It's very interesting that we have, obviously Mark Strong is our main villain, Frank, who I really love in this. I really, really love Mark Strong in this. The dude is, like, tailor-made to play villains. He can play really good guys, too, like in Kingsman, for instance. But he's such a great... As long as he's not being lazily typecast, he can play a really awesome bad guy.
Literally walking out of the car.
There's that scene, just that whole scene in general.
I love that scene.
Sometimes, with no context whatsoever, if I'm frustrated about something and just kind of walking around, I'm kind of muttering under my breath, what's with the high five? Fucking high five bullshit.
You said that the other day, actually.
I'll give you a fucking high five. Yeah, and then of course he sees who he thinks is Kick-Ass, and it's almost like you kind of climb out of your car, you step out of your car, you climb out of your car. I would swear to God, that door opens by itself and he walks out and down that alley.
It's nuts.
A scene where he's complaining about kids having kick-ass parties while he's doing coke, and that expression on his face when Chris walks in as he's taking the snort and he tries to hide it. He even freaks out his henchman. He's like, "Oh my God, you're back on the coke." Long story short, I love Mark Strong in this movie.
Oh God, yes.
And then we have Christopher Mintz-Plasse, obviously, who was most well known at this point, obviously, for Superbad and Role Models. Basically as our villain. Like, going into the movie, I had no idea he was supposed to be a villain, because the trailers portrayed him as another superhero.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Red Mist thing, like, the way the characters in the movie see Red Mist is how he was portrayed in the trailers.
Right.
So I had no idea that he was, like, basically a mold when he was Red Mist. And yeah, it's very interesting how they... Basically, if you want to look at Chris D'Amico in one way... It's basically like if Richie Rich was the villain in a superhero movie. Which is a very interesting concept. So yeah, and he's really good at that whole, you can tell, like, obviously he's like McLovin, so you just kind of brush him off. He was also Evil Ed in the Fright Night remake. That was the year after this, though. But there's something about his performance where you can tell... Like, he actually does it really well. You can see the makings of a supervillain kind of happening in its very early roots as he's going through this. And when he interacts with Frank and stuff like that. So that was a really good transition for his character. And yeah, it is... The movie is hilarious, but it also does really well at getting super, super dark. Like, it gets darker the more it goes. But the comedy is still there. Yeah, it's a very interesting movie to watch to see just how far they go with it, and they go about as far as they can, which is what this movie needed, and that's what we got, which is great. There's also some funny in-jokes in there, like when they're going to the theater to see The Spirit 3.
That's funny. In retrospect, that's really funny.
Yeah, that's another thing I like about Frank's character, too, is when they're killing Randall Bagnall's character. And he's just talking about, like, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's an obvious joke where he's the horrible crime boss, but he's also the father, so he's talking about how he's going to get a slushy mixed and Twizzlers and stuff like that. And we're only going to miss the trailers, it's okay. But it's while he's talking about this, we hear the guy being tortured and killed in the background. like right before he says, and some Twizzlers, we hear a gunshot. So yes, there's so much to love about this movie, and most of us, like I said though, I can understand, like, Roger Ebert's review for this was really famous, because he hated it.
Yep.
And yeah, watching this movie, I can totally understand somebody finding it absolutely revolting. With all the stuff that goes down in this movie, I get people not liking it. I'm just really, really not one of those people. It's one of those ones where I can acknowledge, like, yeah, there's some sick shit in here, but that just makes it what it is, and makes it all the better for that. The sequel goes farther. The sequel's fucked up.
Yeah,
but I really like it too.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't like the sequel. Once again, I totally get it. But I really like it. I love just how fucking far they went.
Its box office ruined the chance at 3, but Matthew Vaughn has went on record saying he's going to try to make a Hit Girl prequel and then work on the third one.
We kind of already know her, though, don't we?
I guess we're going to find out more about Hit Girl and Big Daddy's, their background. He said this in 2015, so you never know.
Alright, and now I need to hurry up and finish. Speaking of the fact that I can understand a movie being sick and revolting to people, we're going to go to Super now. And Super is basically James Gunn's attempt at what we just talked about. James Gunn, who we now know for... he had done Slither, and he wrote... Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, he wrote. Mm-hmm. But obviously, he's famous now for Guardians of the Galaxy. So this was kind of his first kind of taste of this genre before doing Guardians of the Galaxy, which is very interesting in retrospect. And this is a very different story, though. This is... Frank is a fry cook. And he just works in this little diner, and he's married to Liv Tyler. But we immediately dive into this, where his wife gets taken away from him by Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon is an evil drug dealer named Jacques, who is very, very friendly until he's killing you. The whole band of them, really. Because there's that moment where his main henchman is Michael Rooker. Of course, you don't have a James Gunn movie without Michael Rooker.
Of course not.
And Rooker's obviously Rooker. We know what Rooker's capable of as an actor. He plays these really, really dark, sadistic characters. And he is Kevin Bacon's main henchman. And so we have this scene where, this heartbreaking scene where Frank is losing Liv Tyler to Jacques for good, and he's being dragged away, and then just everything is going to shit. And then Michael Rooker's just there and offers him candy. Yeah. So, yes, it's actually quite... well, before we go into that, obviously another James Gunn regular appears. Nathan Fillion plays a Christian superhero on this kind of public access TV show.
The All Jesus Network.
Named, yes,
The Holy Avenger.
The Holy Avenger.
Yes.
And he's watching this, and it's a James Gunn cameo. James Gunn is this demonic character that's trying to lure kids to sin.
That's
basically kill that quickly. And watching The Holy Avenger basically gives Frank the idea to become a superhero and patrol around in this very, very real world, much like Dave Lazuski did. But the difference here is that there's something never fully... We talk about it very, very briefly, and he kind of mentions it in narration. But what we were talking about with Big Daddy, Frank might very well be a deluded psychopath.
Yeah.
Because there are crazier people in this movie, just hold on. Yeah. And we get kind of a hint of this quickly, because it starts with Liv Tyler's character was... this storyline is actually quite heavy, despite the kind of comedic nature it's trying to go for. I don't know, we'll talk more on that later. But this whole story that Liv Tyler used to be this hardcore drug addict, and then she finally, after going through a lot, eventually got clean, and that's when she ended up with Frank, because she was a waitress at the diner. But then she starts having guys coming back over to the house, and she's falling back into it, and that's eventually how she ends up with Kevin Bacon. That's this ultimate drug dealer. But when Frank first comes home and sees these guys hanging out in her house and getting her high, the very first thing he does is fantasize about pulling out a sword and stabbing them in the throat. And that just immediately is when you think, this guy may not be all here. Just as normal as he's played up prior to that. And then we learned that he's had visions since he was a child, where he would see evil. It's like Bill Paxton in Frailty. He would have images of evil people with giant demon heads. And then when he eventually decides to become a superhero, is because he has a vision of these tentacles cutting open his skull, exposing his brain, and God's finger comes out of the sky and touches his brain. And that is when he decides he's going to be a superhero. This guy is not right. It's also worth noting, the voice of God is Rob Zombie.
Of course it is.
Way to go, James Gunn. So, yeah, okay. Rainn Wilson is very, very good in this.
Yeah, definitely.
He's extremely pathetic. He's extremely psychotic. There's clearly things wrong with him, and just this whole thing is all fucked up. But at the same time, he's still a guy that you feel bad for, despite all that. Which takes a good actor to pull off, and he really did. Like, he can really do that pathetic thing. He did it to a lesser degree in Hesher, which I thought he was incredible in. Let's see, he plays that guy that you should hate for every reason, but you still kind of like him anyway, and you want him to succeed in one way or another. But then we're introduced to Ellen Page, a comic book store clerk, who's just very, very excited about this whole thing. She's just kind of... we first meet her, and she's basically, saying, like, gay slurs, and she clearly is somebody that has no filter. And then just for absolutely no reason related to nothing, when she's done going on these random tirades, she just says, like, how crazy would it be to be a midget? And she just crouches behind the counter and says, can you imagine seeing life like this? And that's just, her character's just all over the place like that. But then quickly, and she gets very, very much into it when she learns who he is, and that he is the Crimson Bolt that's been running around being psychotic and beating people with a wrench because he thinks he's doing justice. But she's more into it than he is. Like, he just kind of says, like, I think they might know my secret identity, and her response is, they know your identity? Fuck! But eventually she decides that she's going to be his Robin, Bolty. And then they do the thing. It's once again, it's just like Kick-Ass. They have the moment where they just kind of sit behind dumpsters and get bored waiting for crime to happen, because that's what real life is. Until they get involved with Jacques' story and things get out of hand. Now the thing about it is, where a lot of problems here lie are, once again, I know, like I said, I can have a really, really dark sense of humor and really sick sense of humor, sure. And I don't mind movies like that. Like some of the shit in Kick-Ass is sick. But with Super, I have a really hard time finding the line of what is what. Mm. Especially when you look at Bolty. While Ellen Page is amazing in this, as she often is, her character is very, very... I don't know. Like, we talk about, like, Big Daddy being a psychopath and Frank being a psychopath, which you obviously have to be in order to be real-life superheroes. Bolty is kind of a different kind of psychopath. She's, like, she's really, really off. Like, to a disturbing degree. See the time where they're trying to... Like, it's funny for a while, the idea of, let's beat people up for doing minor offenses. Like, there's the guy... But then we get to that point to where the guy cuts in line at the movie theater. And yeah, it's supposed to be a funny concept that he really gives justice to people who just did mundane things like cut in line.
God bless America.
Yeah, but the thing here, though, is... This scene with this guy, all he did was cut in line to the movie theater and tell him to fuck off. I like the way he repeats it. You go, fuck yourself. Fuck yourself. When he comes back and he hits that guy in the head with the wrench, he busts the guy open it's very brutal and realistic in a way to where there's really not a lot that's funny about it. And he hits the woman that he's with, too, just for chiming in. And this is where I'm starting to wonder when it's supposed to be funny and when we're supposed to see that he's crossed a line. Because I do believe that there is a moment in the movie we're supposed to find where Frank is not right and something is off. But I don't really know where that line is, of when we're supposed to find it funny and when we're supposed to go, oh, he's actually crazy. Because the movie gets so serious at the end. This movie is like, it's even less an action movie, more of a drama at the end. Which makes it even more confusing as to when we're supposed to make that transition of finding the brutal shit that happens funny and not. Because when we talk about minor offenses, there's the guy that Bolty wants to go after because he keyed her friend's car. And the scene ends with her almost killing him. And when... Obviously, it's a minor offense. He keyed a car, and now she's going to kill him. But the thing about it was, we feel like it's escalating in the scene, but when that scene is over, Bolte is talking to him, and we learn that she thought the whole idea to begin with was to kill him. And that's when we realize that her character is so... Like, they're psychopaths. She's on, like, a whole other planet.
Right.
And not in necessarily a good way. She is a dangerous, dangerous person. When they're shopping for supplies, she almost stabs that guy for bumping into her shoulder. It's really... Yeah. But then, and there's the scene, of course, the scene that made this movie kind of famous, that people still talk about. It's like the first thing people jump to when they talk about this movie. The scene where she flat out rapes him. And it's just... What in the fuck is this? Like, this movie is one thing, but then when Bolte is Bolte, this goes to some seriously fucked up places with her. And there's the whole idea of when she dies, and how graphic that is. For some reason, there's still a sadness to it. But even so, the world is probably safer without her, despite the fact that she was trying to be a hero. Which in itself is kind of a sad thought. Like, if she knew that... Like, can you imagine telling that character, you end up dying brutally and graphically, but we're probably safer for that? She would probably be devastated.
I would say so.
But she gets the Wolverine claws, and she, stabs me. When she's killing people, when she drives the car into the dude, into the brick wall, she's laughing like a maniac. It's a really disturbing character, and it's really unsure where it's like. Like I said, it actually is. Not only is it built up to be, it legitimately is a sad scene when she dies.
Oh yeah.
So that's hard to say, and you can take that into another place of when he just obviously they can't go to the police because he's the Crimson Bolt. But after the ending is over, he picks her body up, wraps it in a blanket, and puts it in the back of his car and drives home. And we never know what he does with her. There was a misconception that he buried her in the yard because of that scene when he and Liv Tyler were in the garden. But still, what did he do with her? But because of what we've seen him do, I can't imagine it was something sane. But... Okay, and then another thing that kind of messes with the tone is you would think maybe if they took like a comic booky approach to it, maybe that would be something. Like the scene when he says he's building bombs and then just these animated letters come up that say bombs. It's like, okay, you're trying to be comic booky now? And then they do that again throughout the ending action scene. And it's like, as the movie's getting deathly serious, now you want to treat it like a comic book movie?
Yeah, it's a weird placement.
I'm so confused. But I do like the concept of, like, the whole, everybody always knows it. Like, as soon as they see him, there's no mystery. Like, there's no secret identity. Like, she figures out that it's him pretty quickly. When he's standing in line, and then he goes and gets his suit and comes back, they're like, hey, you're that guy that was just here. And when he throws the thing through the drug dealer's window, and it's like, hey, that's that guy! I do like that approach, but nevertheless, yes, it's all very confusing. And then, because there's, yeah, and on top of the unpleasantness, just when we're trying to make this a comic book movie, there's the scene where, like, Liv Tyler is being raped, and it's intercut with Frank setting a guy on fire, and while he's on fire, stabbing him. It's like, I'm really not sure what the fuck the tone was here, because James Gunn is clearly a guy that knows his stuff. Like, Slither is really good, and a really good mesh of horror and comedy. And obviously Guardians of the Galaxy was really successful and did a lot of meshing of different genres. What happened here? Because you can see, his stuff seems to be quite well thought out prior to when they're made. I'm just not sure what happened here, but it's just a very fucking bizarre movie, and not nearly as sick and twisted in the charming way as something like Kick-Ass or something. Because Super is definitely more of like a cult classic thing.
Oh, yeah.
But
Most people don't even know it though.
But I don't know. I just don't know how to take it. It's just all very confusing. The tone, just everything. I'm really not sure what he was going for, but so clearly, I prefer Kick-Ass. But yeah, it's. I'm just not sure about. I don't know about. Just I don't know. It's fucked up.
Alright, so our worst of the year video came out yesterday. AJ's movie reviews was out on Friday. We have Gaming with Ash coming out tomorrow, and of course the Raw Podcast 11:30 p.m. Monday night, and Wednesday, of course, at 9:30 p.m. Thursday, Sip and Stack, and Friday, AJ's movie reviews will be tackling the movie that is the reason why this is happening, Deadpool, as well as How to Be Single and Zoolander 2. So, that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. Cryptic comment next week is communication. So until tomorrow, boys and girls, that's all we got to say about that. AJ, any parting words?
No, go.